amazing guest for today, moderated by Ms. Ava Chin. So welcome to 21 Pell, and we're really excited to learn more where you left off on November 12th. And for folks who haven't had that opportunity to see, go out and see it when you have that chance.
Hi, Karen. Would you like the mic, or are you okay with this?
Yeah.
Oh, we can. Because there's this one. There's this one as well. Okay. Well, hi everybody. We're so grateful to have Jennifer and George here and to be here at 21 Pell Street. I think it was amazing. Many of us have seen different iterations of the documentary, and I thought that these trailers were amazing, like really well edited, and they really make you want to see the film, don't they? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I am Ava Chin, and I want to thank the director, Jennifer Takaki, and producer, George Hirose, for being here, and also, again, for 21 Pell Street for inviting us to speak. Corky really wanted to give a voice to the community through photography. And now, Jennifer, your documentary is providing a platform to amplify Corky's voice and his vision about the community through film and bringing it to audiences of all ages, carrying forth his legacy. So I want to kind of go back in time to the beginning of your journey with Corky. The first time you met him, and when you realized that he was going to make a great subject for a film. Can you bring us back?
Sure. I'm sure most of you have already heard this, but I was at actually an AAJA event, and a friend of mine, oh, that's close.
You have to talk into the mic.
Can you hear me? A friend of mine was doing I don't know, like a round table or whatever, and I went to go listen to him, and when it was over, I just happened to look at the person that had a media camera because they were standing up, and I said, "Where's the bathroom?" And it happened to be Corky Lee, and he said, well, he's like, "I don't know where the women's room is, but I know where the men's room is." And I said, "I guarantee if you tell me where the women's room is, I'll find the men's room." And then he said, "Well, actually, the building was built in blah, 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 and, you know, it could be that the men's room is on a different floor than the women's room." And I said, "Just tell me where the men's room is." He's like, "I'll show you where it is." And I said, "Who are you?" And he's like, "I'm Corky Lee." And then as we were talking, he said, you know, he's like, I'm like, "What do you do?" And he said, "Well, I'm a photographer and I shoot Asian Americans." And I said, "You shoot them?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I document them." He's like, "Right now I'm working on mayors across the U.S." And I said, "My dad is actually considered the mayor of a city." And he's like, "I'll shoot him then." And I said, I just couldn't understand why he did what he did. And the more questions I asked, the more questions I didn't have answered. Like, it's just, like, he didn't get paid to do these jobs. I'm like, where do you come up with these ideas? Like, he just comes up with these ideas that these are important topics. And so, yeah, I kind of had been looking for, I'd recently moved to New York, and I was kind of looking for subjects to shoot for 5-minute videos. And Corky just seemed like a good candidate. So I said, I think, I'll follow you with my camera. And he's like, okay. That's just how it kind of started. Very nonchalant, very informal.
Great, thank you. I just want to invite George. Can you talk to us about your relationship with Corky and your relationship to the film?
Okay, I met Corky very late 80s, 1980s. Actually, he was working for Expedia at the time, and working for Henry Street Settlement. And I had worked with Henry Street Settlement for a little while, and for years actually. And I was having a little solo show there, and so we worked together. And then he showed up at the show, and then we were showing up for each other's events and all kinds of things for many, many years. And at the time, I was a young man searching for identity. And I'd grown up as sort of a less than functional Japanese family. Didn't want to be Japanese anymore. I told my parents that actually when I was like 8 or 9. So I don't want to be Japanese. Everybody hates me. And I was trying to look to reestablish, find myself. And I found myself as a Japanese American around that time. And he, kind of pointed out like there was a much larger world, much more powerful world, of people that, that I was Asian American, and I had never met anyone like him before that was so Pan-Asian. He was interested in everybody. He asked me a lot about my own upbringing in Japanese culture, and he shared with me a lot of his thoughts about being an ABC from NYC, and I would say I was a JA from NY. And he, he just had a tremendous effect on transforming who I was as a person, and now I feel like I'm Asian American first, but I'm a Japanese American, it's very important to me, so should I talk a little bit more about how I met, like
Sure.
how I met Jennifer and everything too. I met Jennifer probably mid-2000s, and I had known Corky, and I saw that Jennifer was shooting a documentary about Corky, and I was kind of like, really, and that's a great idea, and because I knew who Corky was, and I knew that he was important, and so that goes way back, to like when I first met you, and then Corky was always showing up at these events. Jennifer and I are kind of steering committee, had this group called Jaja, which became now Zaja, right? And so Corky actually introduced the founders to each other, and maybe you can correct me if I'm completely off on any of this stuff. But and I still feel like there wouldn't have been this community unless it was for Corky, and he was always an honorary member. He was always kind of part of what that was about. And as I evolved as a person. I got more involved with the community. I was president of JACL New York for a long period of time. I just stepped down, gave it to a younger person and a woman, which I think was appropriate. Her name is Takaki Mori. I don't know if she's here. Corky was always around. Today, I have to say, today is a really auspicious day. Today is the day of remembrance where Executive Order 9066 was signed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, resulting in 120,000 Japanese people of Japanese descent to be incarcerated, imprisoned, including my own family, which was in New York. Longer story, I won't get into it now, but they were, went back on was arrested, deported, imprisoned in West Virginia, and then was traded for hostages on the MS Gibson, which left from Pier F in, Jersey City. But anyway, so he, I remember telling Corky about this history. He didn't know about it, but he would always show up. I would always call him and say, we're having this event, and can you think you come by? And he was like, oh, I'm going anyway. It was always like that, And then he would call me for things, or if he couldn't cover something, sometimes he would ask me to come over. And so we had this kind of, we spoke the language of photography. I've been a career photographer, very different from him in many ways. I photographed a lot of events. I worked for nonprofits, so we crossed paths a lot. But I was more of a fine artist, I do like nightscapes and things like that. And so, but he would always come to my openings, I always got his. And, we kind of developed a real friendship with a kind of common understanding of the power of photography. And, I did things he didn't do, he did things I didn't do, so we had this sort of brotherhood. And, I really felt this strong kinship with him. And then when Jennifer, when he passed away, it was, for many of us, and I can feel the love in this room right now, so it's like really, I know you all understand how, deep and heartfelt his loss was, you know, that we just all could not believe that he was wrong, because he was around everywhere, you know, and omnipresent, you know, if anybody was. And so I saw a rough cut of this film, you know, fairly late in the development of it, and you know, immediately started to, you know, weep and, you know, get very emotional about it. And I actually kind of asked Jennifer if I could come in and support it. And so I came in and, you know, just, we got it finished, you know, because we have to get this film finished. Let's do it now, you know, immediately, you know. So I jumped on there, and it's been like a great journey. I'm so proud of the team that has put this film together, and just to be part of it, it's just an incredible experience. And the idea that Corky's, you know, he still lives with us, you know, and he's so present in me and with Jennifer, and, you know, because we're living with him every day, you know, on some level, you know. So, you know, he's not gone, you know. His spirit is very strong. Everybody in this room, his spirit is strong. And so, yeah, so that's kind of my story of the journey. And we hope to bring this to the mainstream. We're doing, you know, some festivals and things like that. And, you know, eventually we'll try to make it back around here, you know, and when the timing is right, you know, and hopefully other things in media. So that's...
Thank you, George. That was very, very Thank you for your words. I think that every time I see a different cut or iteration of your film, my eyes start welling up. You know, all of the emotions come out. And so I think what you're doing narratively is really working. But it's also reminding us how much Corky meant to us, I think individually, but also as a community. I think I think I said this one time when we had our memorial with Asian American Arts Alliance for Corky. There's a way in which I think when you look at the different documentaries and you look at his work, you start thinking about who you were when you first met Corky, who that young person was, right, back in the day. And then, because he has such a long career, documenting so many aspects of our myriad communities through the decades, there's a way in which we kind of reflect back on the young person that was us, but also where we are now. And I think that one of the amazing things about Corky is that he really was this hub that connected all of our different communities. And in the ways in which our community can be fractured, unfortunately, Corky had the amazing ability to step over all of those lines and bring people together. One of the things I always know, so I am both a proud descendant of a Chinese railroad worker, as well as the daughter of a veteran, so I'm part of auxiliary. And I remember when I first went to auxiliary, to the Legion, I would go to the post and I would feel slightly uncomfortable because I was like, this is my father's space. This is not my space, right? And then I would see Corky there as a son, wearing the cap, hanging out in the office, doing his things, and I thought, okay, I do belong because Corky is here. So I just want to thank you for the work that you've been doing. And Jennifer, you've been doing this work for, is it close to 20 years? Yeah, okay, so that's a long time. And if you can talk to us a little bit about something.
I keep thinking there's a cat and it's Anthony, sorry. I just feel this like feel for your presence.
Yes. Well, I thought it was actually the spirit of Corky with us, myself. Yeah, right. So can you talk to us about some of the biggest challenges that you faced in telling this story, Jennifer? I know that there were many, but if there's like a top one or two that you want to share with us, that would be great.
I think the biggest challenge was deciding that I would do from a 5-minute piece to, like a full-on documentary. And it wasn't so much that I didn't think Corky was worthy of it. I think I needed to say that I would take it on because it's a huge responsibility. I think if anyone thinks that, you take on somebody's story. You have a responsibility to that person, and Corky comes with a community of people. And I think for the longest time, I really genuinely wanted to do just a 5-minute piece. I also genuinely wanted to do it very grassroots. I wanted everything to happen organically and just follow him and follow the story and see where it led. So I didn't map out this whole plan. I didn't map out anything. I didn't map out a budget. It was just me and Corky for the longest time. So I think a decade in, I finally kind of decided that it was worthy of, just because it had accumulated this trove of treasure of footage, and then also because the community was also around, and I felt like it was really important to get a story out, and I had been following him. So at that point, I decided I would go ahead and confirm that I would move forward with it. But yeah, that was one of the bigger challenges for me, was just to commit.
Yeah, and I can understand how when you first start off, if you're thinking that it's a 5-minute or a 10-minute short, it's very different than a very different headspace. But of course, because of the importance of Corky's work and the scope of his work, it makes so much sense to do a full-length documentary. And you were able to. We were so lucky that you followed him for so many decades. For so many years. Sorry, close to 2 decades. I'm probably sure it felt like more. So anyway, so we're glad that you did it. I have another question for you. So Corky had this decades-long career, right? And anytime you're working on a very, very large project where the subject has an immense body of work, there are tough decisions that have to be made over what material gets cut and what gets included. Was there anything, I had asked you this already once before, and so for the benefit of the audience, was there anything that you had to cut that you really wish you could have kept in? I know you mentioned the 50s confession program. You can talk about that. Was there anything else as well?
I think initially when Corky was alive, the reason I started the film to begin with was I always felt Corky was underappreciated. I felt like he needed to have a big story behind him so that he could go out on the road and do Q&As. Frankly, he should have been here, not me. And that was my plan initially. So when I had started following him, I really wanted to give him this voice. And I wanted to follow things that were important to him. I know that so many of us have had conversations with Corky where he can just stick in historical facts like no one's business and just make it like a germane sentence, the 1882 Exclusion Act, was over here, and I remember when, he could just stick in these things, Wong Kim Ark, or, you're just but he gives backstory to these very historical facts. 1965 Immigration Act, this is where I took the photo of the mailbox, he just had all of these amazing sentences that led to whole different historical stories in themselves. And so at one point, Linda had done the film that I actually really loved. I mean, it had all of his historical facts in it. It should be put in the 1965 Immigration Act. We put in redress movement. we stuffed it with everything historical. But you know what? It didn't resonate because it's just too much information. So that was kind of the journey that we went on to really kind of figure out the scope of Corky's personal life, the historical, and his photography.
Fantastic. Can you talk to us about the challenges of, well, first of all, how many times did you go out to cover the events for the Transcontinental Railroad in Utah?
Just once.
Okay, the once was it 2014?
2014.
It was 2014. Okay, all right.
Well, it wasn't his first year. The first year was actually 2002.
Right.
Yeah.
But 2014 is the one where, that's, and that photograph is, you were there. So, and Anita was also there, as was I, in 2019. And it was a very different kind of event because it was so big. But the photograph from 2014, becomes the seminal photograph because Corky's able to do the photograph the way he needed to, right? There weren't a bazillion other photographers there, like demanding and everybody's eyes were in different directions. Do you remember that? Anyway, so can you talk to us about covering that event in 2014?
I honestly, I know I should be prepared for this question, but I think I was in such a zone that I don't really have remarkable, like I just remember making sure I had the shots, like, you know, just following it, but I don't really have, like, it's like such a vacuum of just such an event that was so important to me, and I just didn't want to screw it up. And yeah, I mean, I'm like that kind of photographer that always has like a battery that's dead, or I run out of tape at the time, or, you know, and I just remember like all the forces were with me that day, because it actually turned out okay. And technically I should have had like second or third camera person there, I mean, just to make it exceptionally good and make sure that it was covered.
Was it just you?
It was just me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't have any small moments, because I just remember just making sure that I wanted the buses, I wanted Corky, I wanted the crowd, like, and you know, you're always just trying to set up shots, but yeah, I don't have any specific anecdotes. I remember Leland Wong, he was, he's the activist in San Francisco, and he's so amazing and fun and funny, and he was always funny. I loved that whole element. It was so historical. You knew it was an important moment. You knew that it was a moment that was going to last for a long time. So yeah, it was really important.
Yeah, I think particularly for us descendants, Corky gave us the permission to go and come on that particular day, right? In those years when he was doing it. I actually went on my own on like many years before. And I was like the only Chinese person there, and it felt so wrong, right? That no one really understood this history. So Corky really blazed this path that allowed us to come together and commemorate our ancestors who helped build the greatest engineering marvel of the 19th century, which united the country after the Civil War. And if he hadn't done that, I don't think that we would have been able to come out and, en masse, right? And I think that it's important not just for us descendants, but for us as Chinese Americans and as Asian Americans to come together in that way. So I will always be grateful to Corky for that. I see some hands.
Actually, Japanese Americans also. My grandfather was a railroad worker.
Ah, did not know that.
Is it possible to ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so I know what you're talking about, and I'm sure a lot of people sitting in the house know what you're talking about, but I also see a lot of young people here, and a lot of people who may be new to what Corky has done in his entire life. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about the significance of this Utah photograph and the event that Corky helped put together in relation to the Transcontinental Railroad.
So, for those who don't know, the Transcontinental Railroad was it united the U.S. The Central Pacific came from California and Union Pacific west of the Missouri, and they didn't know where they were going to meet. At the time they initially started, I believe, don't quote me, I'm not a historian, but I believe they all started with white railroad workers and people. And by the way, these railroads weighed like 700 pounds, and it took 5 people to move one. But coming from the west, the Central Pacific, they had to go through the Sierra Nevadas, and to go through the Sierra Nevadas, that's where you had to bomb it with or blast it with dynamite and make it. And so they kept losing white workers. I think at the time they needed like 5,000 workers to blast through the Sierra Nevadas, and they had like 500 because all of the guys were just jumping off the train and like landing wherever they wanted to go. So one of the top guys had this idea that he was going to hire a whole bunch of Chinese who had been there anyway from the gold rush. And I think in the end they needed like 5,000, and they had maybe 11,000. And then from there, like they asked actually more Chinese to come from China. So it was a very significant event. Obviously, it was a huge engineering feat, and they didn't know where they would meet, but it was a race to get across the U.S. Because they would get money, like these big magnets, right at the time, the railroad magnets would make a huge amount of money every railroad mile they could lay down. So they got money ahead of time, but then it was a race to get the railroads in. And at the time, I think this was actually a fact that Corky was very proud of, is that the Chinese Americans, towards the end, were like getting like 10 miles a day of track. And if you think about that, like initially they were doing 2 to 3 miles. By the end of it, they were really pushing to get the tracks laid. And it was a very significant moment. So when the two tracks met, they didn't, again, know ahead of time, but they met at Promontory Summit in Utah on May 10th, 1869.
And so did Corky recreated the photograph where the Chinese were excluded at the end?
Yeah, so initially in 2002, I hadn't started filming Corky until 2003, but in 2002, somebody in here would probably know the details more, but I believe like OCA was hosting, they were going to give Corky an award. And they were, it was like a significant award. It was in Utah. And Corky said he would go if he could shoot OCA members in front of the railroads where they met. And he took this symbolic photograph. But in the back of his head, he always wanted to recreate that photograph. And in 2014, that's when it happened. So Corky always knew that there were Asians missing from the photo, and for any person of any descent who was kind of erased from history, that was a really significant moment. That photo symbolized everything that Corky stood for and why he did what he did, because it was again this engineering feat where Asians were erased and not seen and not given credit for what they did. And he wanted to make sure in the back of his head that he could rectify that, and that's what he did with the railroad scene.
I just want to mention, apparently at the end when they finished the railroad, that they told many of the Asian workers, the Chinese workers especially, that they could walk home.
And also, by the way, when that photograph was taken, you'll see it in the film, but there's this arch, it's called the Chinese Arch. It used to be named the Chinaman's Arch, and I think a lot of protests and petitions got it renamed the Chinese Arch, but that's where the railroad workers who worked on the railroad were when that photograph was taken. So part of Corky's journey to bring people not just to the railroad was to have a shoot and to see the Chinese Arch. And to get people to go to those Chinese arches, Corky had to coordinate that. Right. He had to, it wasn't a typical kind of tour that took place.
He had to hire a bus, bring people over. He even in 2018, I went to 2018 and also 2019. And in 2018, he brought a Taoist monk, it might have been Buddhist, but he brought a monk over and did a blessing. And it was beautiful and very moving. If he hadn't done that, I never would have gone there. I don't think I wouldn't have been aware of it. So, there were so many ways in which he built a path towards history, and also for us to kind of really be connected with our ancestral past, as well as an American past, right? Like one of the foundations of American history. The uniting of the country was incredibly important, because prior to the railroad, it could have taken you by horse and carriage. It would have taken you months to cross the country. But once the railroad was completed, then it was like a week basically.
And it opened the West. That was huge, right? That's where it was all of these minerals and all these things that were taking place that hadn't been experienced before by the people in the East. That was it was hugely significant.
So I have a question about the last time when you showed a rough cut here at 21 Pell. Can you tell us how, because Corky was here, can you tell us a little bit about Corky's reaction to what he had seen?
Yeah, you know, Corky's a funny guy. He saw the film, and I don't know, was anyone here when Corky saw that film? I think it was in 2018, I think. So we were always like trying to balance his personal story with this, like his photographs and history. And for Corky, it had a little bit too much family history. It was like he thought it was a little expose. He didn't say that, but to me at least. But he wanted to keep it more to the family or to the photos and what he did. But what he didn't understand is like that's funny because the balance between the community was like some of the we have people leave their questionnaires up here because we'd ask all these questions about what they thought of the film, and people couldn't get enough of Corky's history. People did not know anything about Corky until they saw the film, and they didn't even know he had a family or brothers or even like a mother that lived in Chinatown. So yeah, they couldn't get enough. And frankly, we did do like a lot of different versions with his family history, with different parts of his family history. And and I think that one had a lot more of his dad in it, and his relationship with his dad.
Where's Rob G? Rob, are you in the back? I wanted to get a time check.
5:20.
Because we will definitely take questions from the audience. And let's see. One question though I did want to ask is in terms of where are you going next with the documentary, and yes, what is happening next, and also do you need funding? Can people help?
Right now we are doing film festivals, and so we're actually going to announce a film festival in March that we're going to go to. I can tell you it's in the Northeast. The way the film festivals work is we're not supposed to disclose, like they tell us when we can say something, and usually like it's a month before the festival. So we are going to be showing the film in the Northeast. So if you're in the Northeast,
as we are,
and we will post it. We'll go to photographicjustice.com, or you can go to our Facebook page, and I'll always try to post like where we are on the Facebook page.
okay, so fabulous. Okay, so let's open this up to questions from the audience. I see your hand raised. Let's hear from you because we haven't heard from you yet.
I was the comment like 4 years ago when you shot the rough cut, and I think you started at 4 o'clock, and then by 6 o'clock, the coffee showed up, and he was a little embarrassed. That I remember.
Why is he embarrassed?
I think the film about him something, and he tried to say he wants to say us about another thing, like he just wants to try to change the subject matter. I remember.
He wanted to. I'm sorry.
Change the subject matter.
Change the subject.
Yeah. Because everybody talked to him, like he was showing, then I think at 4 o'clock, then he was late for something. They finally showed up.
Yeah, but if he was late, you didn't see it.
Yeah. No,
really, whatever he had to say.
No, he saw it. I remember, I think
He didn't see the whole thing.
Yeah,
But the thing about Corky is he didn't have any control over content. I made very sure very early on. And it's not that I wanted to do anything to embarrass him or, to anything, but I just think it's really important to keep that established kind of, like he's just a talent. And I say that lightly. But the thing about Corky also is that he would, like, for the Facebook page, it says Photographic Justice by Jennifer. And I delineated that also because he said that people thought he was part of the film, or that he, that Corky and me, although we were shooting, he was the subject and I was the shooter. So I wanted to delineate like our
And I still the postcard you give out that day.
Say that?
I still the postcard you give out that day. Remember you give out the postcard for the movie?
You gave a postcard, yes.
Like this maybe?
No, for the 4 years for your apartment, you give out the postcard. The postcard, little postcard.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's up here. Yeah.
So I do think that I'm just going to interject for a second that when you're the kind of person that is behind the camera, and it can be very difficult to then have the tables turn and be the subject, right? And I do think that because Corky was such a great photojournalist and an artist, he respected your artistic vision and voice for this film about him.
Yeah, Corky used to tell me that I was probably more Chinese than he was at the time, because when I initially started to film him, I lived in Hong Kong from 96 to maybe 2002. I worked in news and entertainment for Star TV, and I came over with a company actually that was based in Colorado. And when Corky and I met, we bonded over history. We bonded over talking about Chinese history. And he would always tell me, you know more about Chinese history than I do. And I was like, I kind of don't think so. But I loved his fact. I love that kind of a guy that just gives facts. I love these kind of like conversations with him. I loved all of it. So yeah, we connected on a very kind of deep level in that respect. So yeah, I had a lot of respect for him.
All right, other hands. Okay, in the back. In the middle, that's you. Yes, you.
I'll stand up. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have two questions. One is from my husband, and one is from me. But since I have the floor, I'll use both questions, if that's okay. One is a little bit personal to Corky, and I'm not sure that anybody wants to answer it, but I knew Corky as a person while he was living, and I always kind of wondered, how was he funded? I mean, how did he did his work at great personal sacrifice. So, how was he funded? I mean, where did he get the money to go to San Francisco, or to go to Colorado, or to Utah? That's question A.
Well, Corky had a wife, right? So the wife had, she had also worked full time and done her thing and had saved money, and so between the two of them, and Corky's work Corky worked in the day as a printer. So between the two of them, and then also he did exhibits. So he really, and he did a lot of off stuff. Like he did weddings, he did, whatever people wanted to shoot. Sometimes people would give him money. He did a lot for the community. Sometimes different organizations would ask him to shoot banquets and stuff, so he got money from that. But it was a combination of things. It wasn't easy for him, but he made it work.
Thank
Your
you.
second question?
Yeah, my second question was, I think this lady touched on it a little bit, and George touched on it a little bit, is about identity. As I look around the room, many of us are in that middle age and up group, and we have several generations, maybe second and third generation, young people who are descendants of immigrants coming into this picture. And so my question, Jennifer, is really more about audience and how that vast audience that is also growing and also awakening to their heritage is going to be part of your strategic plan.
Yes, very much so. We're actually very excited to get it up to students. There's a trajectory of a film that you have to follow, like they're called windows. Like you have to do film festivals first, and theatrical, and then community screenings, educational, broadcast. But the point is like it is very strategic for us to make it this an educational film that will be available to schools and to figure out how to get it into communities. In fact, one of the communities I looked up just recently, just to plan for the future, is the least diverse cities in the U.S. Here's like a list of 10 that we're gonna, kind of look into, because those were really the pockets that Corky wanted to get to. Not necessarily the least diverse, but he really wanted to not preach to the choir of large AAPI communities. And hearteningly, like a lot of young people love Corky. Corky resonated with people of all ages, which is very different from a lot of people. I mean, he was a gifted and talented person to shoot because of his communication and his charm. He was able to really resonate with so many different generations of people and to really kind of get messaging across. And he never changed. He never faltered. I've seen interviews from him in the very early 80s, and he never was off message, and he never looked bad, right? I mean, you don't hear a lot about it, but Corky was a handsome guy, and he never had an off day. It wasn't like I had to set up a camera and let him know ahead of time. I mean, if if I had a camera and I was ready to shoot, he was always ready. And I don't know, like, anyone that can do that. I mean, even the best of actors. I mean, Corky was really made to do what he did. And I was very fortunate to be able to shoot him.
Thank you. There was a hand in the back. It's Susan. Yeah.
So mine is more of a comment. I know a lot of people that know Corky, and I always thought that I would have a chance to meet him, and I didn't, unfortunately. But when you said, Jennifer, when you said that the Chinese railroad workers were erased from history or were invisible, I think that resonated a lot with people in my generation or my age group because a lot of times things happen in our community and it's often overlooked, or it's been swept under the rug, or be it anti-Asian hate crime where it's not reported or underreported. So I think that this message really resonates with people young, not young, but people my age, in our 40s, 30s, 40s. So thank you for doing this incredible film.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah, see your hand raised.
Me?
Yes, you finally.
Okay.
Well, you did ask questions at the very beginning. So.
She said it, I did. So just to follow up on what that lady was saying, have you considered developing this film into curriculum material? Because I understand New York State is considering an AAPI history as part of core curriculum.
Yes.
And what is really important about this film, of course, Corky is important, but the title itself indicates its importance. Photographic justice, the term justice needs to be like so highlighted and be emanated throughout the curriculum itself. So have you considered developing curriculum?
Yeah, I started all of this early on. I mean, just to decide what was going to be in the film, like the educational aspect of the film is always important to me. So we haven't, it's still a work in progress, and it's by far not done, but yeah, it's definitely in the forefront.
That's to follow up. And so if you are interested in developing curriculum, have you put together a group of educators who help you develop that? Or have you approached?
We're working on it, but if you want to talk to me afterward, or we can.
Absolutely.
Yes, and if anybody in the audience knows how to do that, knows folks who are working in the curriculum level, please come up and talk to us.
Yeah, because that's something I'm constantly researching. And by the way, photographic justice is a term that came to be because in 2002, when Corky shot that first photograph, he was interviewed by the New York Times. The New York Times happened to be doing a profile on him. And in the interview, he said that being able to shoot the Chinese Americans in front of the railroads was photographic justice. And that's why it's titled, the film is titled that.
I think I'm getting a signal that we have room for maybe one more question or two more questions. Yes, except George wants to say something.
Hi, a lot of you got this little sticker here, and a lot of you wondered why this exists. I work with a puppet troupe, and we do fringe puppet shows, and my friend Adam Ende and I were talking about honoring people that had passed away recently, including Frank Golding and Sylvia Rivera, and Corky. And so we decided to make a Corky puppet. And then I saw, we were working on it, and then Adam made a couple of like mock-up drawings and things, and then it just kind of clicked. It was like, can we make a sticker? And could you put "Where's Corky Lee" on it? Because at that point, I was always just like, every time I go somewhere and he wasn't there, I'd be just devastated, And so, and the question in my head was always, where's Corky? Where is fucking Corky? Why is he not here? And like on a day like this, like the day of remembrance, he was always there. He was always at our ceremonies and our candlelight vigils and all that kind of stuff. He was always there following us, when we parade in the streets. And I always expect him. So that's why today was kind of like a day that I really felt Corky's presence. My friend Adam Ende is a much better draftsperson than I am. We worked together to design this particular sticker, And there's an Instagram page, Where's Corky Lee, on Instagram. That what I do now is I put them in places. They're all over the city. I especially concentrate a lot on this area because people see them. It's like, oh, Corky.
I've seen it on Mott Street.
Yeah, hi Corky. And so there's more stickers here. If anybody wants to help, just put them up in places. If you DM me on the Where's Corky Lee page, I'm starting to collect images from other people, and I'll start to post them. So I just started the page a few months ago. So, and I had been doing this since maybe 2 or 3 months after he passed away. It was in the summer, and it was kind of a way of me dealing with grief on a concrete level. So anyway, he's a very handsome guy, and it kind of really worked out very nicely.
They're beautiful. Are we inviting people to
Yeah.
take one
I have
of
more
our
in my
friends
bag too.
at the end?
If you feel like you just want more, and just pass them, give them to people that it means something to, or just put them in places. If you're going off to Jersey or something, they're all over. They're in the Bronx. They're in all kinds of Brooklyn. They're all over the place. And I just kind of I can't go anywhere. It's like my wife is here, and she kind of laughs because she knows that everywhere we try to go somewhere, I'm busy putting stickers up. I try not to. I try to vandalize personal property. I always look for. I look for those red fire call boxes. I'm obsessed with those.
Yeah,
that's so nice.
There was one.
Yes.
That's where I first saw
Yeah,
it. You put one on Mott and Pell.
Oh yeah, and the Chinese red. It's like
Yeah.
it just belongs there. So every time I see one of those, I'll run across the street, and I pull one up. And a lot of my friends up here have seen me putting these stickers up, whoa, yeah, you look like you're gonna put a sticker up. trying to figure out where the traffic lies, and how to get that great shot, like that environmental shot, and that decisive moment shot of people walking through. And I'm always thinking about Corky, how Corky might have shot it, And so it's a way of staying present. And I want just people to see this, and if you don't know who Corky is, they'll just go, who's Corky Lee? And that's enough for me. Maybe they'll look him up, or they'll hear his name again, and they'll understand why he was so important. So anyway, so feel free to, I'll put some more out if anybody wants to take a bunch of help with the Where's Corky Lee sticker project. That would be great. Thank you.
It's also postcards.
Yeah, and there's postcards, Photographic Justice postcards right here. It's a team effort. Amy Chin here is working on renaming of Moscow.
Yes, so there's a co-naming of Moscow Street to be Corky Lee Way.
Yes, and so a lot of us are kind of working together to keep his legacy alive. And is this a good time for Amy to say something?
Well, or at least we can say we should have one more question, and then we can go to that. Yes.
I just want to introduce myself. I'm the State Assembly District Leader in Flushing, Queens, and all Asian districts. And I keep getting reelected because the Asian community, they appreciate me just like I appreciate them. And I just wanted to give you a little history that when I was the chair of the graduate council at City College, and they shut down Asian studies, Hispanic studies, and Black studies, I organized 10,000 people, and we have a rally. And I'm wondering if Corky was there taking pictures, and that I identified as there.
Very possible. He has, according to the film, over 800,000 photos at that point in time. So
I
probably close to a
identified with the
million.
importance of the pictures. I really, and my granddaughters are Asian as well.
Right.
I identified.
Thank you for coming and watching. So before we close this out, Amy, so there is a co-naming effort to go on to co-name Moscow Street to be Corky Lee Way. There are at least 500 signatures already, and Amy, I don't know if you want to talk or to just tell people to come your way. Yeah. Many more.
I know that many of you have signed already. We've been working on this for a year now, and it's a joint effort with Think Chinatown, OCA New York, Westchester, New Jersey, Long Island, and also the Chinese Adoptees Alliance. We are working to co-name Moscow Street for Corky Lee. We're calling it Corky Lee Way because it is the Corky Lee Way.
Yes.
Moscow Street is where, at the intersection of Mott, is where many of us saw Corky last. And that's where he had his last exhibition of photographs. And it was his idea to turn that newsstand with Ed Chang into an exhibition, and also with Karen Zoe. So it was Corky Lee and Friends. And so we are looking to co-name that street Corky Lee Way. We have over 500 signatures now, and we would like to get as many as possible before we go to the community board in March. If you think you have signed online already, sign online in person because that also holds a lot more weight. I have this beautiful photograph here of Corky at the newsstand. And it's just a beautiful way to honor him. We all know that Corky is everywhere. Corky is here. Corky doesn't belong to any one of us, but this is a beautiful way of having a prominent and important intersection in Chinatown named for him so that we can remember him. And the other important thing about the intersection at Moscow and Mott is at the nexus of where Corky liked to hang out, and like in Jennifer's film, where he held his office at Silk Road Mocha, or he would be eating at Hop Key. And so we feel like he would be really at home there. Moscow Street, some of you also know, is named after another community activist, Frank Moscow. So that for Corky to share his name with Moscow is particularly meaningful to really important people who did things for the community. We know Corky as a photojournalist, but he was so much more. He reported on things, he photographed all of our events, and it didn't matter if you were the King of England or if you were a junior high school student, he would treat you the same. And so we really want to honor him in that way, and this is a beautiful collective effort. I have the petition here in the front, and my colleague Dan Lewis, who is with OCAs in the back, he has a petition too. So if you can sign before you leave, it would be great. If you have other questions, please, contact us. You can email it as corkleyway@gmail.com. So, love y'all. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Amy. I really appreciate the wonderful panel for spending the afternoon with us and getting to know more about the film. We can't wait. Hopefully a sequel, a prequel, maybe a Netflix series. Because we have so much footage. Before you all leave, I have a few announcements to make. One, on your way out, we have some free COVID testing donated by Coalition of Asian Pacific Americans by Chris Chen. So grab a few on your way out. Help yourself. Secondly, to follow the tradition of Corky, if you'd like to continue this discussion, we're treating them for dinner. So come on out and ask more questions if you like. Cross Street, we're going to the House of Joy. I do have an important announcement to have Vic Huey to speak a little bit about the vision of COMA, an organization that Corky had started as well. Vic?
Well, this place, 21 Pell, David Corky said, we need a place for people to meet. He sees this empty building. He says to Vic, what are you doing with this empty building? He goes, well, I want to run some screenings. I want to have community meetings. And thus they started 21 Pell 5 years ago. During that time, I was working outside of Chinatown. I didn't know anybody here, even though I lived here. But I started to meet more people, generational people who lived in the community, people who lived outside the community. And we started coming together, like, what can we do to help Chinatown? And when the pandemic hit, we were going through some really rough times. This is where people started organizing murals and street patrols and food. We came together, So we decided decided that we got to get organized. So we created this organization called COMA, the Chinatown Organization for Media Awakening. It took us about a year to come up with the name. Nobody could agree on anything, and that's the problem right now. Since Corky passed, there's a lot of division in our community. People fighting over this, over that, over his legacy. So going forward, you know, we started a fundraiser, which is on GoFundMe. Actually, we tried to get some money from the state, but we're not good at, you know, playing the political game, city politics, and like some of the other people who know how to manipulate government. But this is a community organization. It's grassroots, and that's what we want to build, a grassroots organization. One of the first things we want to do is we're going to build a Corky Lee workshop. We'll build a dark room to train the next generation of Corky Lees. We have another person named Jeff Lee, who is also here, who's a musician. We want to create a place that the community can come to, so we can teach the next generation. And we just started our fundraiser, and hopefully in the future we'll continue his mission. Anyway, if you want to know about the organization, it's 21 Pell. There's a little GoFundMe tag. You hit the button, it'll give you a rundown of what we're about.
So we thank Jennifer Takaki
Thank you all, and thank you, Ava, for a great job. And again, if you want to continue the discussion, we're going to have a meal, just like Corky did for potluck. So join us, First Street, at House of Joy. Thank you for coming.